This morning, our scripture lesson took us to an uncomfortable place. Two parallel stories featuring lots of discomfort. The first scene comes right after the Pharisees essentially were trying to troll Jesus, that is, ensnare him in some pious legalism. The Pharisees were looking for a way to discredit the incredible work that many of Jesus' followers were doing to bring people to gather in community within the kinship of God, the work of feeding, healing, caring for, and blessing. Anyway, the Pharisees didn't like the attention that Jesus and his disciples were attaining, so they tried to discredit him by suggesting, "Your followers don't follow the legal rituals of hand-washing before the meal." To which Jesus replied, "It is not what goes in the body that defiles, but that which comes from the heart and mind." Then a Canaanite woman, that is, a non-Jewish person from Cana, approached Jesus and asked for the healing of her daughter. She begged for this healing. Jesus' disciples, having just been admonished for not being Jewish enough by the religious authorities, they turned around and asked for this woman to be dismissed because she herself was not Jewish. Irony. But Jesus, after having an exchange with the Canaanite woman, realizes that their faith, their destinies, despite being people of different ethnicities, they are bound up together. And naturally, Jesus heals that Canaanite woman's daughter. These are difficult and timely vignettes for us today. COVID-19, the ongoing reckoning of our cultural racism, political unrest, three things that are front of mind for us today, and were front of mind for Jesus and his followers. As my favorite verse of Scripture reminds us, for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. That which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out that which has gone by. In other words, there is nothing new under the sun. And yet these circumstances remain new and challenging to us, especially as they are compounded by the experiences of our own lives, our own mental and physical wellness, and that of loved ones, our own challenges in relationship, our experiences of grief and loss, our own temporal concerns like income, safe housing, food. If we only focus on the negative, the scarcity, we will become like those Pharisees, so focused on holding our own power, so fearful of Jesus' work, that we ourselves become a bit like Ebenezer Scrooge. We didn't get to do a Christmas in July service, so there's your reference. But that Canaanite woman, she had hope. She was in a devastated mindset, but still she had hope. And this Jesus figure could help her daughter. The scripture points out her posture. It says she kneeled before Jesus and begged of him. You can imagine the desperation and assured hopefulness in her voice. Well, as you know, these past few weeks we've been working through a series called The Inventions of Summer. By and large, they've been references to Mary Oliver's poetry. She has written a poem called Egrets. I'd like to read it for you now. Where the path closed down and over, through the crumbled leaves, fallen branches, through the knotted catbrier, I kept going. Finally, I could not save my arms from thorns. Soon the mosquitoes smelled me hot and wounded, and came wheeling and whining. And that's how I came to the edge of the pond, black and empty, except for a spindle of bleached reeds at the far shore, which, as I looked, wrinkled suddenly into 3 egrets, a shower of white fire. Even half asleep, they had such faith in the world that had made them. Tilting through the water, unruffled, sure, by the laws of their faith, not logic, they opened their wings softly and stepped over every dark thing. That line about mosquitoes really resonated with me. Soon the mosquitoes smelled me, hot and wounded, and came wheeling and whining. Mary is clearly dealing with something difficult in her life as she wrote this poem. And for her, it's so easy to fixate on this tiny, difficult insect when we ourselves are feeling vulnerable. This past May, Tabor and I spent an entire weekend and then several weeknights preparing our backyard garden for the summer. It was a beautiful experience working together, looking at just the leafing rosebush and apple trees, loading them up with hope and expectation for their yield. By the end of our gardening, which of course was really just the beginning, we were exhausted. And all we wanted to do was sit on our back porch and eat dinner together. Nearly as soon as we sat down, they set upon us, the mosquitoes, and that horrible sound that they make, and that other sound that I'm sure Tabor would describe as even more horrible, my voice saying, "I guess your blood is just too sweet." Aww. But before we even took our first few bites, admiring the garden and the work that we had just accomplished, we picked up our plates and went inside, where we had just spent the whole winter and early season of COVID. Today, at some level, we're talking about the postures of prayer that see us through difficult times, like the kneeling of the Canaanite woman. There is a posture that comes from feeling vulnerable to mosquitoes. It involves many bruises. I don't know if this is the best posture for us to pray through distressing time. In fact, I think it forces us to fixate on the negative. The more hopeful posture might have been more of a dance. Of course, this is a bit of a stretch, thinking about swatting mosquitoes and applying bug spray as posture, but it's an okay metaphor. In the beauty of the Alberta summer, sometimes the thing we fixate on are the tiniest mosquitoes. Prayer postures are positions that we fix our bodies in when we need to change our frame of mind. This is why yoga is so popular, in my opinion. Yoga, of course, is a collection of Indian prayer postures used in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. It is contemplative in nature, and the more difficult postures, where we are required to focus on our breathing and our pose, they completely distract us from the feelings and expectations we had arriving to the yoga studio. Personally, I seek connection with God through contemplative prayer, and find I am best able to go into a contemplative headspace when I'm on my bicycle. My body is preoccupied with staying upright and moving in a forward direction, but my mind and heart are free to notice beauty around me, and to process the thoughts and feelings in my head. Often, when I know I'm just in a grumpy mood, and can't figure out why, or when I'm upset about something and my inclination is to burrow in a heavy blanket, I know that by changing my posture, by getting on the bike, I will be able to pray in a better, disruptive to negative thinking kind of way. Now back to Scripture. Those Pharisees, I'm trying to imagine their posture as they sought to tell Jesus off. Were they puffed up and haughty? Were they masking a feeling of scarcity where their posture may have been to be small and closed in on themselves? That Canaanite woman, she embodied one of the ancient postures of prayer in our Christian tradition. She knelt. Even today, liturgically, we are often called to kneel. It's a posture of humility, but we kneel with hope, not out of fear. That Canaanite woman, she knelt in hopeful humility, knowing that Jesus would be able to provide for her daughter, even as she wasn't part of his clan. The cosmic joke, however, is that she had more share with Jesus than the Pharisees, which is a group to which Jesus belonged. There are other postures of prayer described in the Bible. Bowing. I've been thinking that this could be a thing that replaces the handshake in our post-COVID world, perhaps by greeting others with a bow. we will be able to better acknowledge and honor their souls, in doing so, affirming our shared humanity. Laying prostrate, this is when we lay completely flat on the ground. Often Scripture describes Moses falling in the presence of God. This is a form of vulnerability, really. The divine, eternal one is incomprehensible. What can we do but make ourselves vulnerable in God's presence? I admit I've never prayed prostrate seriously, but I wonder what it would do for my spirit. Then, of course, there's standing prayer or hands-raised prayer. In the Bible, the priests were often known to pray while standing or with their hands raised. It's almost like a prayer hug where we reach for God, embrace those near us, and sway in the movement of the divine. This is a joyful form of prayer. I invite you to think about it. What postures have you been noticing yourself in these past few months? Do a body scan every so often. How can you intentionally adopt a new posture of prayer for your prayer life to move you from feelings of scarcity and fear toward fuller, more hopeful communion with the Eternal One?